So, I don't know about y'all, but I have played some pretty fantastic indie RPGs this year. Starting off with Starlight Legacy, then moving on to Shrine's Legacy, then Quartet, and now Kingdoms of the Dump is like the cherry on top. Every December, I have an annual award show, and I really have to kind of go on through and figure out what's the best of the best, and I'm telling y'all, trying to figure out what the best indie RPG is this year is going to be really hard because a lot of them are really good, and this game is totally sweet, and I definitely do want to tell you all about it, and I think that's worth a sub as you come and you join a party and you level on up with me. With your sub, your like, and your brand new hype, it helps me out a ton. Thank you so much for that. And now, let's go ahead and dive right on into this dumpster of a game. But why did I call it a dumpster? Because it's definitely not a dumpster fire. It's more of like a dumpster because they took all these great different RPG ideas and then they dumped them all together to give us one of the best games I've really ever played. This is the combat system of something like Poplar Croix, where you target tiles, along with the trapping and the pushing and the pulling of Radiant Historia, and then a huge helping of inspiration from Super Mario RPG, where every skill comes from a bank, not of flower points, but of scrap points. There's also timed blocking and attacking mechanics, and just the ability to jump around and search everywhere in the towns and dungeons, just like Mario did back in the day. Every time I turn around, I find a new inspiration from a new SNES game, and it's just so cool. So now that you have the general gist of the things that are going on here, let me tell you about the story. You play as Dustin Bensley, which I kind of think is an Amish Justin Bailey, you know, that famous password from Metroid. And anyway, because of his sheer ineptitude and laziness and incompetence, the king gets captured, and then the peace between the 5.5 kingdoms of the dump is completely shattered. So it's up to you to redeem yourself by rescuing the king and unlocking the mysteries of the past, as well as push back the toxic waste from another place. There are a ton of little inside jokes here and plays on words that are just so cute. They'll say stuff like, "What the dishevel is going on?" rather than "What the devil is going on?" Or they'll call the sword Junk Caliber instead of, Excalibur. Or they'll say, "How do you do, my good can?" instead of "my good man." It's funny little things like that that just make it a little joy to play. Just like in Super Mario RPG, the game takes place in an isometric format, and you can explore it just like Mario did, only there's a whole lot more freedom of movement here, as there were just tons of hidden areas and secrets and treasures to find all over the place. You'll be jumping up on top of tires to reach rooftops and collect clips, which is the currency of the game, as well as find different treasures, which are found in lunch boxes. There's also secret hidden sparklies that you can come across, one-time use keys to open up treasure chests, rotten food that you'll find on the table that heals you up, stuff to find in refrigerators, and then trampolines to bounce you on up to bring you over to much higher ground. Everything here is just kind of turned on its head, because this is a world of trash. Not everything is JRPG, sunshine, rainbows, bunnies, and light. Sometimes getting down and dirty is what you need to do whenever you're in the dump. You know, like taking a dump in order to save the game in a porta potty, and actually wiping your ass to work as a tent to heal up your party. It's gross, but it's totally fitting, and I love it. I briefly touched on the battle system earlier, but let me deep dive into it now. There are no random encounters at all, not even on the world map. All encounters occur on screen, and they all take place in a turn-based format. Each of your characters begins in a 3x3 grid, and the enemies have their own grid as well. At the beginning of your turn, you'll get one free movement, and then you can also attack or use a skill or an item or, whatever. And if you move to the front of the grid, your attacks will deal more damage, but you'll also take more damage, as well as vice versa if you move over to the back of the grid. You don't have to be at the front of the grid in order to attack anything though, it's really just for defensive purposes, and then trying to evade all the traps. There is a turn order gauge on the left-hand side of the screen showing you whose turn it is next, and there's also timed attacking and blocking, which will deal extra damage or reduce damage by hitting the A button at the correct time, just again like in Super Mario RPG. I mentioned traps earlier, because you and your enemies can both set them. You'll set traps like glass shards on the ground, oil slicks, lava tiles, mushrooms, whatever. And then if you move into that tile, you'll get damaged or you'll get a status effect or something like that. But you can also manipulate your enemies by pushing, pulling, or dragging them into the tiles that you've trapped. That was one of my favorite things to do back in Radiant Historia, and it is back here with a vengeance. I love it. There's also limit breaks here, or boiling points, that you will reach whenever you deal or take enough damage, and each character has their own boiling point. Unfortunately though, whenever you reach a boiling point, it takes the place of the attack command, so you're kind of like forced to use it right then and there. So it's really hard to save it for the boss fights, unless you just want to use like skills or defend or items or something like that. You're really just kind of forced to use it then and there. It kind of sucks. You can use your skills in battle, but again, it comes from a pool of party points called scrap points, just like the party pool of flower points in Super Mario RPG. You start off with 20 different scrap points, and the only way to get more is to pray to the garbage lords of the past at the statues that you find are scattered throughout the dungeons. This makes it so that you have to be really careful about what skills that you're using, and whenever you level up, you'll gain all sorts of different stats, as well as be asked to allocate one bonus stat point. Again, just like in Super Mario RPG. Now keep in mind, you are not healed up whenever you gain a level, and there is no difficulty selector either. And I'm not saying that the game is hard, I mean, it's not a Souls-like, but I am saying that it's not modern-day easy peasy either. This is definitely a 90s era SNES RPG difficulty-styled game, so get used to it. And speaking of 90s SNES RPGs, just look at this world map. Isn't it to like die for? I love the way that it scrolls. It reminds me a ton of Terranigma. Just everything here is so lovingly done. And remember like how in Earthbound, whenever you went on down to like the deep darkness and you were like teeny weeny tiny, but there were still these gifts on the world map? It's kind of sort of the same thing here. Only, they're not little gifts on the world map to find, they're, lunchboxes and all that, but whatever. There's even hidden areas on the world map that you can discover too, and they only show up whenever you stumble across them. It is a great way to keep you engaged, out and exploring, and really looking around and off the beaten path. I've always said this, my favorite thing to do in RPGs is to go off and explore. And like I said before, all encounters are on screen, so there are no encounters on the world map. And just like in any good SNES RPG, you can save on the world map too. The dungeons themselves are extremely well crafted and thought out with different elevations to play through, obstacles to jump over, platforms to run across, pipes and vines to climb, grapes to smash, and all sorts of different things to see and do. And in a really cool little twist, each of your characters has like a different on-screen ability that they can use here too. For example, Dustin is able to pull out big screws out of the ground for clips and scraps, and he can also turn other metals into scraps, as well as bust open gates with electricity. Batavia can climb up vines and poles, so you're constantly going to be like switching out your characters in order to utilize their different on-map skills. It just spices things up a whole ton. And then, just for like some quality of life features, there is a quest log that keeps track of your main quests, as well as your side quests, and if you do lose a battle, you are able to retry it by asking the magic 8-ball, so you're not like royally screwed or anything. But now, let's talk about some negatives. You know how whenever you're like hacking a ROM and you're like trying to play this Japanese game and everything, and then you find out after you apply the translation patch that the confirm and the cancel buttons are like swapped because they do that over there? Yeah, for whatever reason, they decided to do that here. B is confirm and A is cancel. I'm sorry, but it just drives me nuts. I wouldn't even bring it up or care if there was like a settings menu and I could change the controls to whatever I wanted, but there isn't, so that sucks. And then also, maybe this will be addressed in the final version of the game. I am playing a review copy after all. But it just seems like there's some sort of like herky-jerkiness whenever I'm going through an area. I don't really know what else to call it or how to describe it. The screen just kind of like jumps around a little bit, I guess. I don't know. It's not a huge deal, but it was enough for me to notice it. And normally, I don't notice things like that. But I do know that that whole crowd of the 60 FPS at all times, everything must be super optimized, everything must be in 4K crowd is just going to lose their little minds about it. Personally, I grew up on the NES and the Game Boy, so I didn't really care all that much, but I figured that I'd bring it up. All told though, Kingdoms of the Dump is an absolutely fantastic game, and it is available right now for the PC, and the developers are also considering console releases in the future too, though nothing is set in stone quite yet. But now, I do want to hear from y'all. What do you think about the game, and are you going to try it out? Let me know in the comments, and as always, have a good day.